everybody. Thanks for joining. It's really great to see you again. I'm Brendan Burns, Corporate Vice President in Azure for Cloud Native Compute and Open Source Computing. And today I'm going to show you how we can build consistent multi-cloud hybrid applications with Azure Arc. So let's dive into it. I want to start with the agenda. First, we're going to look how Arc can help you simplify how you build and deploy applications anywhere, whether it's in public cloud, private cloud, or even bare metal. Then we're going to go into some of the developer experiences for your team that can provide you with a consistent, reliable developer experience across all of these different environments. And finally, we're going to talk about some next steps and how you can learn more about Azure Arc. So let's look at how Azure Arc helps you build and deploy applications in a consistent manner, no matter where those applications happen to be running. You know, across the world, customers are running hundreds to thousands of applications across diverse infrastructure in multiple programming languages, across multiple different environments, different public clouds, private cloud infrastructure, bare metal Windows servers, bare metal Linux servers. There's just a really wide variety of different ways that people are building their applications into various different environments. But throughout, there's a real need for consistency of how you build, deploy, and manage those applications to ensure that those applications get rollouts and security patches and all of the stuff you need to make your business work in a scalable manner that's consistent around the world. And that's really where Arc comes in. To give you a sense for this, we're going to talk about an example company, Contoso. Now, Contoso is a conglomerate with a bunch of different companies under its umbrella, and there's a bunch of different systems that make up those that are in those companies, from things like point of sale applications that are out in its stores to, obviously, with COVID, Contoso has had to pivot to doing much more e-commerce, so they've built an e-commerce application. And then, of course, the demands of the business are such that they've had to build a next generation inventory application as well in order to handle real-time inventory across both their e-commerce store as well as their point of sale brick and mortar retail. So this is going to be kind of the frame of how we think about the applications that Arc can help you develop. Now, when we think about these things, what the company really needs from a business perspective is they need faster time to market. They need to be able to react to changes that are being pushed from their competitors or needs from their customers or even global events like COVID-19. They need to be able to achieve this agility with increased reliability and, of course, security, because as we've seen from countless incidents over the last few years, the needs of security in digital environments is always ever increasing. And then finally, of course, a lot of the companies, because of the conditions in the world today, need to reduce costs and work more efficiently, right? There's definitely a cost pressure that is necessary and driving a lot of these business decisions as well. Now, fortunately, Azure Arc can actually help you throughout this changing landscape. The first of all is that their application development teams are the ones who need to make these changes. They can't have long strands of approvals to get new machines, to get new hardware, to manage things out at the edge. They need their teams to be moving faster and doing all of those things themselves using modern application development techniques. But the other thing about it is they've come to understand that, as was said many, many years ago, software is eating the world, and truly every company is now a software company. And so they need to invest in the tools and practices to ensure that all of these deployments happen reliably, because they cannot afford any downtime, because downtime is an opportunity for someone else to come in and talk to their customers. Now, this is all backed with a strong DevOps philosophy, because I think as we think about the modernization of your applications, DevOps is a big part of that, where you're doing governance, code, deployment, monitoring, managing, and it is a circle that feeds upon itself to deliver that agility with the reliability and security. And we're going to take a look at how this intersects with Arc, because the truth is that all of these things are happening. These processes are happening across data centers, edge environments, and multi-cloud environments. And so in order to be able to use these processes effectively, you need to be able to take these processes and make them work across all of those different environments. And that's where Azure Arc comes in. So Azure Arc really is the glue that enables you to take your DevOps practices that are demanded by your business and make them work everywhere. Taking a look at what Azure allows you to do, it allows you to build cloud-native applications anywhere at scale. It allows you to run Azure services anywhere. So we'll talk about how there's a variety of different Azure services that you can run on premise to have a consistency not just of management, but actually of application. It also gives you central visibility, single pane of glass into your operations and compliance. And that's a huge thing, because if you're deploying your applications across hundreds or thousands of different sites, or even things like ships that may be moving around in the world, that ability to have a single pane of glass that shows you, is everything up to date? Are your network firewalls compliant? Is the security that you need present in all of these different environments, is a huge value proposition. Now, I want to talk about what's available right now today. Generally available, we have Arc-enabled servers and Kubernetes. So what that means is that with Azure Arc, you can manage Windows or Linux servers no matter where they are, whether they're in other clouds, whether they're on-premise, or anything else like that. You can also manage Kubernetes wherever it is. And this isn't just sort of an Azure Kubernetes. Azure Arc for Kubernetes works with any Kubernetes anywhere. Now in preview, we've got even more. We've got SQL Server and data services, as well as machine learning. So you can start using those great Azure services on top of your own infrastructure. All right, so now we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how we use Arc to build cloud-native applications anywhere. So what this allows you to do, we're going to look at Arc for Kubernetes. On any infrastructure, you can deploy your applications consistently to all of your Kubernetes clusters. We give you a single way of doing that. You can use familiar tools that you're used to from the cloud-native ecosystem. And you can also have automatic security and governance in a single pane of glass from a single set of tools delivered by Azure as a service, so that you know for certain that every single Kubernetes cluster that you're running anywhere is up to date. It doesn't have any vulnerabilities. It has the right set of tools installed on it to do things like intrusion detection, to have the right firewalls. There's a ton of value that you can have from having a single best practice definition within Azure, help secured by the Azure professionals who understand how that's done, and apply that to your Kubernetes clusters anywhere. Now, when we take a look at Kubernetes anywhere with Arc, one of the things that we're thinking about is AKS, and Azure Kubernetes Service, and we're really excited that we can announce today that the Azure Kubernetes Service on Azure Stack HCI is generally available. This means that you can run a completely Microsoft-supported Kubernetes stack integrated with Azure Arc, running on your own hardware in your own data center, and it's generally available to you today. So that really means that not only can you use Kubernetes inside of Azure, inside of the public cloud, but no matter where you need to take Kubernetes, you can have a Azure and Microsoft supported version of that Kubernetes to deploy your applications. Now in preview, we've got a bunch of great features for the Azure Arc for Kubernetes service. The first is cluster extensions. This allows you to use things like Azure Policy to deploy and manage your Arc clusters easily and consistently. Cluster Connect is something that I'm particularly excited with. I use it on my own cluster. Cluster Connect is a way for you to securely connect and use tools from the Kubernetes ecosystem to your Kubernetes cluster, even when it's behind a firewall. So I can access the Kubernetes cluster in my house from outside of my network securely without exposing that cluster to the public internet by routing the traffic through Azure and through the Azure Cluster Connect. Finally, we've got Service Mesh available in preview for Arc, so you can deploy, using those cluster extensions, you can deploy the open Service Mesh onto your Kubernetes cluster and start using the best of cloud native development, not just for your applications, but also for how your microservices talk to one another. Let's take a look at them a little bit more. So AKS on Azure Stack HCI, I talked about this. You know, Azure is hybrid by design, and it's something that we really focus on delivering a consistent best platform across both Windows Server and Linux for .NET applications on premise, right? So we truly believe that as you're thinking about how do I modernize my my .NET applications, how do I bring those applications into a cloud native world with Kubernetes and containers, Azure Stack HCI and AKS on Azure are your solutions for hybrid environments. It has all of the built-in security, all of the support that you would expect out of a Microsoft product. Now, what I'm especially excited about today is how we can deliver Azure services on top of Arc for Kubernetes. And I'm excited to announce that application services, the familiar paths for running all sorts of different applications that was available only in Azure, is now available on top of Kubernetes running anywhere. So you can have a same consistent high-level development environment for productivity for your developers no matter where those developers' applications need to run, whether it's on-premise or in Azure. And there's going to be a bunch more discussions about this throughout build. So if we return back to Contoso and our applications, I want to talk about how they can leverage Azure Arc to meet those business needs that they had. So they can use Azure Policy and Defender to make sure they maintain security. They can use Arc-enabled Kubernetes to get rapid application deployment. They can use these Arc services, from app services to SQLDB and machine learning, to take advantage of the best of Azure, no matter where their application happens to be running. And to give you a demonstration of this, I'm going to have Jason Hansen come up here to see how Contoso Health can manage applications across cloud and multiple hospitals on-premise with data privacy, regulatory requirements, and all of the compliance that you need in order to deliver a health application. Jason Hansen's one of the lead PMs for Azure Arc, and I'd love him to show you some of these cool capabilities. Take it away, Jason.
Thanks, Brendan. Now, Contoso Health operates hospitals and clinics across the globe, and the company has been going through a major digital transformation and is updating their applications and infrastructure across their entire footprint, which includes those hospitals and clinics. Now, many of the regions they operate in have strict regulatory and data privacy requirements, which means that data cannot leave the region, as well as strict latency requirements, which means that those applications and data need to be hosted on-site. Now, Contoso Health has a mix of applications. Some are internal workforce management applications, which can run on Azure, but others that handle and process patient data need to remain on-premises. Now, Contoso developers also want the freedom to choose the services and tools available to them to build these applications while ensuring that they comply with those regulations. Now, to run and manage their applications and data, Contoso has chosen hardware running Azure Stack HCI, Kubernetes provided by AKS, and Azure Arc-enabled application and data services. Now, let's take a look at a demo that I recorded earlier that brings all of this together.
Let's start by using the patient management app. Now, this app helps the hospital and clinic staff with automated inventory, bed management, accounting, medical billing, claims, and general patient records. Now, we are currently logged in as a nurse practitioner at one of Contoso Health's locations. Searching for a patient, I can see her name and basic medical information. And based on the latest diagnosis, I'm going to prescribe a series of medications and make an order for this patient. Now, the app lets me know that we indeed have the medicine in stock, but that one item from a particular manufacturer is close to the stock threshold, and it suggests an alternative. I can make a quick decision to select a substitute. Now, Contoso developers have a lot of questions to answer when writing an application. Not only what language, framework, or runtime to use, but also how that application should be deployed, monitored, and updated. Now, Azure helps make those decisions easier for developers when writing applications for the cloud, with quick and easy access to a whole suite of tools, including application services, database capabilities, monitoring, and governance tools. Now, traditionally, developers couldn't use the same set of tools and services when deploying to an on-premises environment. That increases the application development cost and overall operational complexity. Now, Azure Arc and Arc-enabled services change all of that. Contoso developers can now write their applications using the same Azure primitives like web apps, function apps, and SQL managed instances, and deploy to either Azure using cloud resources or their Arc-enabled environments. Developers have a consistent experience whether running in the cloud or on premises. And now that we've seen how this app works for a nurse practitioner, let's see how that app is managed from Azure. Now, switching to the Azure portal, and we have a view of one of Contoso Health's many subscriptions. And we can see a few resource groups that hold the infrastructure and app components for their hospitals. Contoso can see all of their resources in one place with consistent role-based access control, grouping, and tagging. Now, digging into one of these resource groups, Contoso operators can view all the resources required to run their app. Here we see an AKS HCI cluster, a SQL managed instance, and primitives for application services. Now let's specifically dig into this AKS cluster, which is provisioned on top of Azure Stack HCI and is connected to Azure for management using Azure Arc. This AKS cluster is running at the hospital, and we can manage it entirely from Azure. We can see that the cluster is online and sending cluster metadata. Now, Contoso has also created a custom location for this hospital. Now, a custom location is a new concept to Azure. Now, Contoso Health has created multiple custom locations, mapping each location to one of their hospitals. The Contoso operators have turned on and configured Azure Arc-enabled application and data services for each of those locations, which means that Contoso developers can now create and manage instances of those services at those locations using the same Azure experiences they use today. Now, that patient management app, it's built using a few Azure Arc-enabled services, including web apps, function apps, and a SQL-managed instance for storage. Now, the application primitives and database are running at the hospital, ensuring low latency and compliance with Contoso Health's data governance requirements. But even though the app and the database are in the hospital, Contoso operators can view, edit, and manage these components directly in the Azure portal, and developers can deploy and update their applications using the same tools they use on Azure. Now, Azure Arc brings a great set of Azure services to Contoso Health locations, helping developers build, deploy, and update their apps. But apps and data services are really only part of the story. Contoso Health also needs to ensure that their apps and infrastructure are monitored, performant, and follow corporate policy, while at the same time staying secure. Now, Azure Arc helps here too, unlocking a set of management services like Azure Monitor, Container Insights, Azure Defender for Kubernetes, and Azure Policy for Kubernetes. Now, we'll look at those additional capabilities in a few moments, but for now, back to you, Brendan.
Thanks, Jason. Now I'm going to talk about consistent developer experiences. We want to show how you can provide the exact same kind of application development environment for your teams, no matter where the compute is running. Taking a look at the process for an application developer, one of the goals of Azure Arc is to meet the developer where they are and leverage your existing investments. So what that means is whether you're doing container-based applications, whether you're using SQL Server on-premise, whether you're using Windows Server or Linux applications, Azure Arc is able to meet you exactly where you are and also help take you forward into the cloud-native environment. So when we think about VS Code, GitHub, things like application services that you might be running on Azure already, SQL Server that you may be using already, or Postgres, or any number of the data services that you can deliver on top of Arc, as well as all of the different Azure Arc infrastructure choices. This is just an amazing way to enable your developers to have the flexibility that they need to build the applications they're used to, no matter where those applications are running. Now, additionally, they get this velocity and stability from a single pane of control. Now, I want to talk about how you can achieve this using GitOps to automatically push changes around the world and have consistency while you also have velocity. Let's take a look at the GitOps workflow. So with the GitOps workflow, we start with a Kubernetes cluster anywhere on any infrastructure. We connect it to Azure Arc so that you can manage it from a single point within the cloud. You can create a GitOps configuration for that connected Kubernetes cluster. And what that GitOps configuration does is it points to a Git repo in GitHub where you're going to have a definition of your application or of the environment that you want to see. Now, there's a Flux operator, and Flux is a really great open source project that we've been involved in and are using. And you can also integrate Helm, which is another project supported by Microsoft, in order to synchronize the contents of your Git repository with the cluster that's running out there. So you have your application state, the desired state defined in that Git repo. And then when you make a change to that Git repo, it's actually automatically pushed out via the operator all the way out to your cluster. And this can work regardless of how many clusters you're managing. This workflow here that is as familiar as merging code can be used to scale your application out to all of the different environments, whether it's in Azure or in on-premise with Azure Arc. So you can do management with code, infrastructure as code, no matter where you happen to be running. And so we want to bring all of these things together with extensions, which you can use in Azure Arc to do infrastructure as code, to make changes, install Azure Monitor, and again, make those things happen no matter where your application happens to be running. Extensions really simplify onboarding, and when you combine them with things like Azure Policy, you can automatically create a consistent environment for your Kubernetes cluster no matter where it happens to be. Now, to give you an example of how this all works, I want to have Jason come back on to show you a demo of the GitOps flow and how GitOps can revolutionize the way you do your applications, as well as this single pane of glass management experience that ensures your compliant clusters.
Welcome back. One of the primary goals for Azure Arc is to meet customers where they are with their existing investments. Whether your applications run on server or VM-based infrastructure, or you already have CNCF conformant Kubernetes clusters, Azure Arc can help manage across your entire environment. But what about your existing container-based apps and the solutions you're using from the Kubernetes ecosystem? Now, how do you know that your clusters are configured according to your needs? And how do you know that applications and configurations haven't drifted from your desired state? How do you keep up with the ever-increasing count of clusters, locations, and your cloud environments at scale? Now, Azure Arc helps here, too, with native integration for GitOps. Now, using a GitOps approach means Contoso developers define their apps and any config in a set of files. They check those files into a Git repository and then bind that repository to 1, 10, or even hundreds of clusters. Now, any Kubernetes manifest or Helm chart is fair game for GitOps. And Contoso Health has defined a baseline security configuration, which includes a few key namespaces and sets up global RBAC policies that should live on every cluster in Contoso Health's environment. Now, with everything in source control, everyone stays on the same page. Adding, updating, or removing configuration is reviewed and approved with an audit trail, a discussion, and even test results. Now, this configuration approach scales with Contoso's teams too. Support for multiple configurations lets teams deliver configs and apps independently without stepping on each other's toes. Now, finally, Contoso's teams can sleep soundly knowing that Azure Policy is watching their entire cluster portfolio, ensuring that all of the configurations that need to have been applied. Now, let's look at one more feature that Contoso Health uses for troubleshooting and debugging. And with Kubernetes clusters deployed to many locations, gaining access to clusters for troubleshooting can be time-consuming and difficult. Azure Arc-enabled Kubernetes can help here, too. Now, using a feature called Cluster Connect, Contoso developers who have the appropriate Azure roles can request direct access to the Kubernetes API server. Now, the devs are authenticated by Azure Active Directory, and they're authorized by Azure Role-Based Access Control. Azure Hybrid Connections securely connects to their Kubernetes cluster using Kubernetes native tooling. Now, Contoso developers can interactively troubleshoot, debug, or deploy apps from one spot. Now, Cluster Connect is also a great way to integrate with existing CI/CD systems. Applications that aren't deployed via Azure Arc-enabled services or even GitOps may be deployed directly over a secure connection to any Kubernetes cluster. Last but not least, Azure Arc brings Azure-based management services to any enabled Kubernetes cluster. Developers and cluster operators can quickly and easily activate Azure Management Services. With support for installation via Azure APIs and automatic upgrades, it has never been easier for Contoso to drive consistency across their entire environment. Using Azure Monitor Container Insights, developers and operators aggregate cluster and application logs and metrics across multiple clusters, analyze the data with workbooks or ad hoc queries in log analytics. The Contoso teams no longer have to struggle to find the data that they need. Contoso security teams are happy too. Azure Defender for Kubernetes brings continuous security monitoring, ensuring not only best practice configuration, but also can alert with active threat detection. Now, integration with Azure Policy consolidates policy, audit, and enforcement in one interface, ensuring that clusters remain compliant, even as requirements change over time. Even better, in-cluster enforcement is built on open source technology too. Now, we're excited to continue to expand the reach of Azure Arc-enabled services, and I look forward to helping tackle your tough hybrid challenges ahead. Thanks, and back to you, Brendan.
Thanks, Jason. That was really awesome. It's always great to see our products in action. But what's even more exciting is to see how our customers have used Azure Arc to transform their businesses. And, one of my favorite parts is having those conversations with customers about the cool ways that they're using Microsoft technologies in their own applications. Just this past week, I had the opportunity to speak with Siemens healthinears who are using Azure Arc to build and manage Kubernetes-based applications across multiple hospitals. Let's take a listen to how healthinears is using Arc for Kubernetes. Hello, Thomas. It's really a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you today. To get us going, can you tell us a little bit about Siemens healthinears?
Sure. Siemens Healthinears is a provider of medical equipment, software, and consulting to healthcare providers. We are active globally. We provide predominantly equipment in the diagnostic imaging, lab diagnostic, but also treatment arena. So MRIs, CT scanners, ultrasound devices are our main business, as well as the software that those machines are loaded with in order to come to diagnosis for a patient or improve the operational efficiency of applying those devices.
It sounds especially important, in these times. And so, do these applications run in the cloud?
Well, there are different implementation models. So we have the TeamPlate Digital Health platform that is built on Azure, which is our digital backend, how we provide services around the equipment to, for example, improve operational or clinical effectiveness of the devices. We also have the TeamPlate Receiver in that context, which is an on-prem software that does data processing, for example, for minimization, and provides the connection from the devices into the cloud.
Cool. So the core application platform is running in the cloud. How did Azure Arc help you deliver on Healthinears?
There are numerous reasons. AI is getting more important to customers. We use applications to support them in developing the findings, the reports on the images. And there are numerous reasons why you want to do that on premise. Compliance reasons, people want patient data not to leave their premises, but also round trip times, for example. So we developed the receiver out into an actual Kubernetes cluster to run such workloads. And we adopted Azure Arc to manage that centrally in order to be able to deploy, maintain, manage those applications on behalf of our customers on their premises. And as you said, especially in these times, a quick and speedy deployment of new algorithms, for example, assessing tissue damage to the lung in the COVID-19 context is a very critical application. And our customers actually have to deal with treating patients and not taking care of their IT environment, which is why we adopt that technology and adjust to it.
That's awesome to hear. One of the key things that led to the creation of Azure Arc is that customers like yourselves who have a need for either your business or your customers to take things on premise have the ability to take what you have in the cloud and deploy it at scale on premise and at the edge. So it's fabulous to hear that's working out for you. Building and deploying your applications is one part of the story, but how do you think about the management and governance of all these apps and clusters, especially since now they're running outside of your Azure subscriptions?
That is a very important key point for us. Like I said, our customers treat patients predominantly and don't want to care for their IT infrastructure. That's why we built the TeamPlate Digital Health platform in the cloud to start with. And now with more tasks moving to the edge and the infrastructure becoming broader, it's very important for us to have information projected into a central control plane, not only for the developers, but also for our operations teams to keep track of what is happening there. Because in the end, we want to quickly update, upgrade software versions. There might be critical things to fix. There might be improvements we have in certain AI models, for example, being able to deploy them and keep everything in a compliant state and in a well-running state on behalf of our customers is a key capability that we are leveraging Azure Arc for.
That's awesome to hear how Azure Arc is helping you deliver for your customers. So what's next for Siemens Healthinears?
So apart from rolling out even further applications on top of the infrastructure we introduced with that, we are pretty excited to learn what you are announcing at Build. Managed services, app services, functions, logic apps, and so on all the technology that you provide, and looking into where we can apply it to improve the capabilities of our products even further.
It's great to hear about the work you're doing, especially during these times. I really look forward to working with you further. It's been a great partnership so far. Thank you.
Thank you for the partnership and collaboration.
That was such an awesome story to see how Siemens Healthinears has been using Azure Arc to improve the way they deliver healthcare solutions. So with that, it's time to wrap up, and I'm going to leave you with this. please go to aka.ms/hybrid-build21, where you can see the latest material. You can leverage our cloud adoption framework for guidance on how to use Azure Arc. You can watch the Cloud Native Applications keynote by Gabe Monroy. You can join our hybrid community and learn more about how you can run AKS on Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc enabled application services. And finally, you can do all of this to get started easily with the Azure Arc Jumpstart. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great build.